For more on President Da Silva's visit to China, we bring in Benjamin Norton, an investigative journalist and editor of the independent news website Multipolarista. Thanks for joining us and welcome to the show. Good to see you again, by the way. Which deal, when we look at the different deals that were announced, because I saw all the headlines, but is there one particular one that stands out to you as maybe a surprise?
Well, they're all very important, and what's really impressive is the breadth. They cover so many different topics, from renewable energy to even space exploration. In my opinion, I think one of the most important agreements is the agreement that continues on the other agreement made in March, in which China and Brazil are trying to de-dollarize their trade. I think this is really a monumental shift. Now, it's not going to happen overnight. It's going to take years to de-dollarize trade between these countries, but we're talking about in a measurement of purchasing power parity, which is a better measurement of GDP. China is the largest economy in the world, according to PPP, and Brazil is the 8th largest economy in the world. So two of the biggest economies in the world trying to de-dollarize their trade and use other currencies. This is a historical shift that we really haven't seen since the 1940s.
The de-dollarization, how does that impact, I guess, one, for China and Brazil? Does it help them save money? And then what ultimately would be the impact on the rest of the world, if any?
Well, it has huge impacts for them and for the rest of the world. I mean, we should keep in mind, first of all, that what's very important about the relationship between China and Brazil is China is Brazil's largest trading partner. And actually, interestingly, Brazil has a pretty significant trade surplus with China. China imports more from Brazil than Brazil imports from China. This is a very important trade partnership. In the case of the U.S. and Brazil, Brazil has a trade deficit with the United States. So, in fact, last year, between Brazil and China, there was $150 billion worth of trade, about 90 billion in exports from Brazil and 60 billion in exports from China. Now, we're talking about huge amounts of trade. Even if a small percentage of that is done in other currencies, it will encourage other countries around the world to try to do the same. And also, Brazil and other countries in Latin America have historically suffered from high levels of foreign debt, which is denominated in US dollars typically. And this is something that Lula has talked about a lot. If Brazil and other countries in the region, which they're trying to create a currency for Latin American trade, if they can figure out ways to trade with each other with other currencies, it's a way that they can preserve the dollars they have to pay that foreign debt that they have that has consistently been a drain on their economies. Argentina, a neighbor of Brazil, has suffered with very high rates of dollar-denominated debt, and it's one of the main reasons Argentina has been suffering from such high inflation.
The headlines that I saw, a number of them related to climate change and, you know, clean energy, hydrogen production, but some are saying that there wasn't an agreement that they were expecting, or at least on the investment fund, or at least Brazil may have been perhaps hoping for one. So I'm trying to get a better understanding of that.
Well, we don't have all the details yet. Lula's trip still continues a bit more. And also we should keep in mind that in addition to Lula, there were around 200 business representatives from Brazil. We don't have all of the details yet about those agreements. There are some details that have changed because Lula was supposed to go earlier, but he got sick. But the point is, I think we do see a lot of ambitious agreements in the energy transition. And this is something that Lula has talked a lot about since coming to power in January. He recognizes that the previous right-wing president, Jair Bolsonaro, carried out a massive deforestation policy that really devastated Brazil, but also the world, and contributed to climate change because the Amazon rainforest is the lungs of the world. So we now see that Lula and China are prioritizing renewable energy technology in these agreements that they signed.
So that's fantastic. We had the plethora of announcements. Where do we go from here? Is it, you know, we already had a very good relationship actually for China and Brazil, and then there was a little bit of a pause, and then now we're back at it again. Where do we go from here?
Well, I think there are two questions still up in the air. One, is Brazil going to join the Belt and Road Initiative? In the 15 agreements signed thus far, that has not been mentioned. There's a lot of speculation about that. That would be a huge boost to the infrastructure development projects inside Brazil. China, in fact, in the agreements that they published and the statement that they signed, the joint statement, they do mention the possibility of building railroads and ports and other infrastructure. If Brazil does join the Belt and Road Initiative, it would be joining other neighbors in Latin America. Argentina last year joined the BRI. And another question that is in a lot of people's minds is the expansion of the BRIC system. Lula himself was one of the co-founders of the BRICS, along with China, of course. Even before South Africa joined, it was the BRIC, and Lula was one of the co-founders. And in their statements, both Xi and Lula talked about the importance of expanding the BRICS. We know that many countries like Iran and Brazil's neighbor Argentina and Algeria and even Saudi Arabia have expressed interest in joining the BRICS. Egypt and the UAE and Bangladesh and Uruguay have all joined the New Development Bank, which is the BRICS Bank, and Lula visited the New Development Bank headquarters. And the president of the New Development Bank is now the former president of Brazil, Dilma Rousseff. So what all this shows is that it's not just about the relationship between Brazil and China. It's also about this new multipolar world that they're building together through institutions like the BRICS.
Fascinating stuff. Benjamin, appreciate your thoughts on this. Have yourself a good weekend.